In Monterrey, Mexico, there's this eerie legend about a place called La Casa de los Tubos, the House of Tubes. Deaths and doom haunted this place before the building was even completed. Legend has it that at night, you can hear the sobs of a young girl and the sinister laughter of a boy, both spirits bound forever to this grim structure. Sometimes, passers-by reported seeing the shadow of the pair waving from one of the top windows of the building. La Casa de los Tubos was the dream project of a wealthy couple for their daughter, who was confined to a wheelchair. They hired the best architects and engineers to design a home that would make her life easier. A home entirely made up of ramps instead of stairs. From the first day they started building, tragedies kept happening. Workers plummeted to their deaths like something was pushing them off from the top floor. Even the people who designed the house died. A huge piece of concrete fell and squashed them right away. It felt like they were building a tomb instead of a house. Despite the string of tragic death, the father remained determined to finish the building. So he took his daughter to the house. He thought it'd be cool for her to see the place that was being built just for her. She was excited too, dreaming of a place where she could finally roam free by herself. While her father was busy talking to the new crew of construction workers, she quietly wheeled herself up the spiraling ramp. Round and round, she finally reached the top floor. A sudden gust of cold air breezed past her as if she just walked into a freezer. Her wheelchair even started shaking violently, like it was in the middle of an earthquake. Just then, the lights started to go crazy, flickering on and off. She felt like something invisible grabbed her wheelchair and started pulling it backward really fast. She immediately put her hands on the wheels and tried to pull the wheels forward with all her strength. But she was overpowered. She screamed. The whole house joined in with a scream of its own, like it was happy. Her wheelchair started to slide backward down the ramp. It was going faster and faster, like something was pushing her down with all its might. Then, like a shot from a slingshot, she was ejected from her wheelchair, sent soaring through the window. Everyone could hear a sickening crunch as her body hit the concrete below. Her eyes were wide open, a frozen testament to her final terror. After the daughter's horrifying death, her grieving parents couldn't bear to continue the construction of what was supposed to be their dream home. They abandoned the project and put the half-finished, cursed building on the market. For years, no one dared to buy the doomed House of Tubes. However, a new wealthy family, intrigued but ignorant of its dark history, decided to visit. They brought along their young son. The parents were busy discussing with a realtor. Their son went to explore the upper floors. It was like something invisible was guiding him, giving him a house tour. When he reached the top, the boy suddenly said loudly, "What do you want to show me?" It seemed like he was having a one-sided conversation with someone, or something. His parents looked up at that exact moment. They saw their son nearing a window, and standing next to him was the shadowy silhouette of a little girl, her outline visible, but features indistinct. With a sudden swift motion, as effortless as swatting a fly, the shadowy girl's arm extended, grabbing their son. In a blink, the boy was airborne, hurled out the window with a force that defied logic. His desperate scream was snuffed out as his body hit the ground below, meeting the same bone-shattering fate as the original family's daughter. Then, all of a sudden, this weird sound echoed through the House of Tubes. It was like an old wooden floor creaking, but creepy and unnatural. The walls started making this low hum, kind of like a messed-up lullaby. It was almost as if the whole house was laughing. And just like that, the shadowy girl vanished, like she turned into freezing air. After that tragic incident, the authorities could no longer ignore the house's haunted reputation. They fenced off the cursed land, making it off-limits to the public. Now, locals say the eerie building is haunted by two restless spirits, a girl sobbing in eternal sorrow and a boy laughing in eternal mockery. The House of Tubes was finally sold and completely renovated in 2013. It became a modern, stylish home. Still, it remains as one of Mexico's most haunted places. Who knows what the new owners didn't dare to disclose?
The following is based on a true story.
My name is Mateo. Something happened to me when I was 11. Till this day, I still can't explain exactly the paranormal activities I experienced with my amigo, Diego, 20 years ago. The only thing I could tell you is, I will never again underestimate the power of the unseen. I grew up in San Miguel de Allende. It is known for its fiestas and celebrations, particularly the Day of the Dead. So Diego and I discovered an old, run-down casa near the outskirts of the town. It was known to be haunted, or so the abuelas would say as they gossiped. Of course, we thought it would be brave to spend a night there. How stupid of us. So, one evening, we gathered our courage, flashlights in hands, and we walked towards the old house. The air was growing colder with each step. It felt like someone had put ice packs on our chests and backs. We could see the house. It looked dead. The paint was peeling off. The dark windows were so dark they looked like empty eye sockets. As we walked closer, we heard the sound of gravel crunching under our feet. A distant owl was hooting. I could smell the stink and rot in the air, like old wet wood. Diego muttered, "I have a bad feeling about this." To be honest, I was totally creeped out too. What I actually wanted to do at that moment was to run home, but neither of us wanted to be the one to chicken out. We gripped our flashlights tighter and marched on. A mist started to form around our feet, making it harder to see every step. The shape of the mist looked like crawling fingers trying to grab our legs. We finally arrived at the old wooden door. The door looked like it hadn't been touched in years. We pushed it open. It gave out a creak sounded like an out-of-tune violin, high-pitched, ugly sound. It felt that the house was breathing, giving off a long, drawn-out moan. It was almost like it was saying, "Get out. Get out." It definitely wasn't welcoming our presence. The smell of mildew and old dirts filled the air like a basement that hadn't been opened for years. Cobwebs were everywhere. The room was dark, except for our dimming flashlights. We gathered our courage and walked further into the main room. It was almost empty and very run down. A single painting on the wall caught our attention. It was a vivid painting of a beautiful señorita hanging on the wall. It looked almost new, as if someone had just painted it. Certainly too new to be in such an old and deserted house. Very odd. Does someone live here? I muttered to myself. But that wasn't the only odd thing about the painting. The real scary part was her eyes. They seemed to move, staring right at me, following my every step. Then, the room went ice cold. Our flashlights flickered. Diego quickly whacked it several times, hoping to get it to work, but instead, it died completely. The room turned pitch black without the flashlights. We felt the air getting heavy, like a storm was about to break. Then, another strange thing happened. We heard soft singing, a sad tune, echoing throughout the house. The song was like a lullaby, but creepy. "Did you hear that?" I whispered to Diego. Diego didn't answer me. He was too busy trying to get the flashlights to come back on by kept hitting it. The singing got louder. And then, I felt a cold, tight grip on my right arm. I couldn't believe that Diego was messing with me. "Hey, let go, Diego!" I shouted. But then I heard Diego shout too. He screamed, "No, you let go of me!" Then we realized that we weren't holding each other. Something else was holding us. We suddenly saw a glow in the room. We turned our head towards it and saw that it was coming from the painting we had seen earlier. It was getting brighter and brighter that Diego and I could see our frightened faces. And the señorita in the painting? She was no longer there. Instead, she had stepped out and was standing right beside us. Her hands, with long, sharp nails like claws, were digging into our arms. I felt the sharp pain, like a hot knife searing into the flesh. Her eyes were fiery red, obviously very angry at our intrusion. In a desperate move, Diego started to pray like our lives were dependent on it. I started to pray too. I honestly thought we were going to die. As we prayed desperately, we could hear other voices joined in. Faint, but clear. The room was suddenly filled with the sounds of prayer from all directions. It was like the walls themselves were praying. And just like that, the grip loosened. A long sigh swept through the room, almost like a collective exhale from unseen mouths. The painting returned to its original form, and our flashlights flickered back to life. We didn't need to say a word. We just ran like hell, all the way home. When we got to safety, we both looked down and finally noticed our arms were bleeding. 5 deep holes from where her claws sank in. Even now, 20 years later, the scars never faded. A reminder that it wasn't just our imagination. I used to love the dark. One fateful night changed everything. Now, I sleep with the lights on. I was lying in my bed in my old home in a village in Oaxaca, southern Mexico. It was hot that night. I just couldn't fall asleep. The air in my room felt so heavy, like a wet blanket in a sauna. It was hard to breathe. As I was tossing and turning, I heard something from underneath my bed. It was like a grating sound, like fingernails scarping on the wooden floor. My heart began to thump loudly in my ears. My dog, Paco, was freaked out too. He stood up from the floor. Ears alert, eyes wide and staring at the space under the bed. I flicked on the flashlight from my phone. Slowly, I bent my body over the edge of the bed to look under it. I held my breath, ready for anything, expecting perhaps some critters or pest. But there was nothing, just a box of old clothes and a dusty pair of sneakers. Paco whined softly, still tense. Then, a cold gust of wind that seemed to come out of nowhere, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I looked over to the kitchen doorway. What I saw almost gave me a heart attack. It was a tall, shadowy figure, just standing as still as death and silent as the grave. The figure was hovering an inch above the floor like a dark cloud before a storm. My body started to tremble. Paco growled, a deep, low sound I'd never heard from him before. Then, as quickly as it appeared, that thing vanished. I quickly jumped out of bed and turned on every light in the house. I nervously looked around the living room, the kitchen. Nothing. But I knew what I saw. I wasn't imagining it. I went back to my room, cold sweat dripping from my forehead. I scanned every corner constantly for any sign of that creepy thing. Suddenly, a soft whisper crawled into my ear. It said, "Remember me. Recuérdame." The voice was like sandpaper scraping against the wood. The thing had reappeared. It was standing right in front of my closet. Its edges seemed to blur and shimmer, almost like a cloud of black ink and water. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would leap out of my chest. The shadowy figure was beginning to take shape of a woman. She was glowing faintly. Her hair was soaking wet. Her eyes were empty. It appeared to have only one arm. I felt paralyzed. I wanted to scream but couldn't, like every part of my body was frozen. Then, just like that, she was gone again. I noticed that the closet door had been open, so finally, I mustered enough courage to slowly walk towards it. Suddenly, my foot hit water. The floor was soaking wet. It was like a thunderstorm had just passed through. I took a deep breath and reached for the closet handle with my shaky hand. I slowly pulled it open, making a creaking noise. The smell hit me. The whole closet smelled like old, wet things. All my clothes were dripping wet. It was like they'd been soaked in water and hung back up. I couldn't believe it. Then I saw an old family photo album that I had put away in a storage box years ago in the middle of the closet. Why was it there? I grabbed it and opened the cover. It was soaked, its pages sticking together. I managed to pry apart the wet pages, and there she was, in an old photo. It was my late aunt. That was when I remembered she only had one arm. I'd forgotten that we used to play when I was a kid. She had drowned in a nearby river many years ago.